the morning of her wedding. Prudence Ashford stood in a room that smelled of lavender water and old grief, and let her aunt's maid pin her into a gown that had not been cut for her body. The seams complained. She heard them, small, dry protests, against the width of her back, against the fullness of her arms, against the plain fact that she had been measured in October and it was now March, and she had not shrunk to please anyone. The maid, whose name was Betsy, and whose fingers were kind, murmured something apologetic about the lace at the bodice. Prudence turned her head half an inch and said evenly, "Leave it. If it tears when I sit, it tears. I do not intend to sit until it is done." "Yes, Mr. Soon. Yes, Mr." Said aloud, the word was a small plain object. She turned it over in her mind the way one turned a stone found on a beach. Not warm, not cold, only real. In an hour she would be Mrs. Harrowmere. In an hour she would belong to Lord Cassius Harrowmere, the younger son, the charming son. The one who had laughed at her father's dinner table 3 years ago and said, wine in hand, "I wish that were true." He had been speaking of something else entirely. She had chosen to hear it as if he had been speaking of her. I wish that were true. The words had lived in her since they had lived through the winter. Her father died. They had lived through the season. She had not been asked to dance. They had lived through the negotiation her uncle had conducted, in a voice like a man selling off a heavy piece of furniture, in which the eldest of the Ashford estates, hers, unwillingly hers, since her father's brother had failed to produce a son, had been offered to the Harrowmere family in exchange for a name and a roof. They had lived through Cassius's polite acceptance, and through his equally polite absence in the months since. She was to be married today to a man she had adored at 19 and had scarcely seen since 22, and the seams of her dress were protesting because he had not thought to have her measured again. But you must understand, child, that a woman who has been overlooked for a very long time learns to carry a small hope the way a servant carries a candle down a corridor. Cupped close, sheltered from every draught, because it is the only light she has. Prudence carried hers into the carriage. She carried it down the church path. She carried it into the vestibule where her uncle, sweating in his good coat, hissed at her to stand straighter, as if standing straighter would make her smaller. She did not stand straighter. She stood exactly as she was, a large woman in a straining gown, 27 years old, with her mother's gray eyes, and her father's careful mouth, and a bouquet of white hothouse roses, which had been ordered 3 days late, and which had begun already to brown at the edges. The organ began. She had rehearsed this walk in her head so many times that the actual doing of it felt like the second performance of a play. She knew where the light would fall through the east window. She knew which of her cousins would smile and which would smirk. She knew that Cassius at the altar would turn as the doors opened, would smile in that particular way that made a room lean toward him, and that for one full breath she would be permitted to believe he was smiling at her. The doors opened. Prudence stepped forward. The organ played on for 4 bars, and in those 4 bars she understood, in the slow, patient way that a woman understands the worst news, that the man at the altar was not Cassius. He was taller. He was broader. His hair was the same iron brown, but shorter, unfashionable, cut for use rather than for effect. He did not turn with a smile. He turned once, briefly took her in, and returned his eyes to the altar, as if the sight of her required steadiness rather than pleasure. His coat was black. His hands folded before him were still. Julian Harrowmere, the Duke. The elder brother, the one who did not come to dinners, the one who was said, by those who claimed to know, to have grown so cold since his wife's death that no fire in the north wing of Harrowmere Court had been lit for 3 years. Her uncle, at her elbow, made a small noise she could not read. She walked. Her feet, knew the walk. The rest of her had gone very quiet, as if a door had been closed inside her chest and someone she did not know was pressing an ear against it from the other side. She reached the altar. The Duke inclined his head. His eyes, she had not been close enough at any prior meeting to notice his eyes were a dark and tired green, the color of moss on the north face of a wall. He did not smile. He said low, "Only for her. Miss Ashford, forgive me. My brother is not coming." The organ finished. The rector looked between them, uncertain. Prudence found distantly that her voice worked. "Where is he?" "Gone, since Tuesday. He left a letter." A pause, the smallest possible pause. "It named you kindly, but it names you gone." She thought quite clearly, "I wish that were true." And then she thought less clearly. He does not know he is quoting a wound. The rector cleared his throat and asked in his careful clerical way whether there was some difficulty. The whole church had begun to breathe as one animal breathes when something has gone wrong at the front of it. Behind her she could feel her uncle beginning to swell with the beginnings of a scene. The Duke of Harrowmere did a thing, then, which she would remember for the rest of her life, because it was the first evidence she had that the world was not, in every corner, arranged against her. Said. He turned to the rector, and he said, in a voice pitched low enough to be almost private and clear enough to carry to the front pew, "The difficulty is my brother's, not the lady's. If she will have me in his place, we will proceed. If she will not, I will announce it myself and take the disgrace on this family's name where it belongs." He turned to her. "Miss Ashford, I will not marry you here without your consent. Say the word, and I take you out of this church by the side door, and my carriage is at your disposal to any address in England. Say the other word, and I stand beside you and finish this. The choice is entirely yours. I will not be offended by either." He had not raised his voice. He had not touched her. He had said, in front of God and her uncle, and every cousin who had ever called her poor plain Prue behind her back, that the disgrace belonged to his family, and not to her. He had said in the sort of plain sentence a man uses when he is not accustomed to lying, that the choice was hers. She looked at him. He was not handsome the way his brother had been handsome. His face was longer, graver, more used. There was a line between his brows that had been put there by grief and had stayed. He was not looking at the church, he was looking at her, and this was the thing. He was seeing her. Not the gown, not the size of her, not the humiliation gathering in the pews, her. She heard herself say, "I will marry you today, but not because I am afraid to walk out." "No," he said, "I did not think you were." "Then why?" "Because," he said, still low, "I have a boy of 6 who has not spoken since his mother died, and I was told, by someone whose judgment I have learned to trust, that you are the only person my brother ever spoke of as though she were kind. And I am past the point of pride." She looked at him a long moment. "Marry me," she said. The rector, who had gone the color of paper, began the service. And so Prudence Ashford, who had come to the church expecting to be given at last to the man she had adored at 19, was married instead to his elder brother, whom she had not so much as spoken to before that morning, and she stood at the altar in a gown whose seams were quietly failing, and she said the words plainly. She did not cry in the vestry either, where she signed her name Prudence Ashford Harrowmere, in ink so black it looked wet as blood. Nor in the carriage, where the Duke sat opposite her and did not attempt speech for the first 6 miles, because he had apparently decided, correctly, that she required silence more than she required reassurance. She cried a little quite privately on the 7th mile, and he handed her a folded handkerchief without looking at her, as if handing a tool to a workman who had asked for it, and returned his eyes to the window. She was grateful to him for that more than she could have said. Harrowmere Court rose out of a bank of yews at dusk. It was larger than she had imagined and colder. Not a single window on the upper floors held a light. The steward met them at the door. The housekeeper, a spare woman named Mrs. Dean, dropped a curtsy that was correct and unwelcoming. The hall smelled faintly of damp stone and of a fire lit only in one room. "His Grace's rooms are prepared," said Mrs. Dean, addressing the Duke. "The blue chamber has been aired for Her Grace." Her Grace Prudence heard the words settle on her like a coat cut for someone else. "Thank you, Mrs. Dean," said the Duke. "Her Grace will take tea in the small library. I will bring my son to her there, in an hour. Your Grace, the child has already taken his supper." "An hour, Mrs. Dean." "Dean?" Mrs. Dean's mouth thinned. "Yes, Your Grace." The small library was not small. It was. Prudence saw at once. The only warm room in the house. A fire had been laid and lit. A tea tray sat on a low table. The walls were books to the ceiling. She sat because her feet ached, and because the gown, having survived the church and the carriage, would not survive another quarter-hour of standing. She was alone for perhaps 20 minutes. She used them to breathe. She used them to notice that the tea had been made properly, which meant that someone in this house had done a small kindness on purpose. She used them to unpin her veil, which had been fixed too tight, and to lay it on the arm of the chair like a flag she was retiring. The door opened. The Duke came in first. Behind him, half hidden by his father's coat, was a small boy in a nightshirt and a dressing gown, holding in one hand a wooden horse whose paint had been worn down to bare wood along the mane where a thumb had rubbed it. The boy did not look up. "Prudence," said the Duke, and it was the first time he had used her name, and he used it as if it cost him nothing, which she noted. "This is my son. His name is Thomas," she said quietly. "Good evening, Thomas." The boy did not answer. He had not been expected to. She had known children like this before. 1. In the schoolroom where she had briefly taught before her father died, a girl who had gone silent after a fire, and she knew that greeting a silent child with the expectation of an answer was the surest way to close him further. So she went on, unhurried, as though she had asked no question at all. "That is a very fine horse. I had one like it when I was small, though mine was gray, and had lost an ear. My brother trod on it. He said it was an accident. I have never quite believed him." Thomas looked up. Not at her face, at the horse in his hand, as if checking that both his ears were still present. Then, very briefly, at her. The Duke, standing by the fire, did not move. He was watching. She realized the way a man watches a fuse. "You needn't stay," she said to Thomas gently. "It is late, and I am a stranger, and strangers are tiring. But before you go, will you tell me your horse's name? Only so that I know who is living in the house with me." The boy's mouth moved. No sound came. She waited. She did not lean forward. She did not smile, the encouraging smile that dies of embarrassment when it is not met. She only sat holding her cup, warm at last, and waited. Thomas looked at his father. His father did not speak. His father, she saw with a small pang, had gone quite still, as if the smallest breath might tip something. The boy looked back at her. He held up the horse. He touched with one finger a place on the wooden neck where a name had once been carved and had been worn to a whisper. "I cannot read from here," she said honestly. "May I?" He crossed the rug. He was small for 6. He put the horse in her hand as if lending her something he did not, on any account, mean to give. She turned it to the lamp. The letters were nearly gone. She could make out an M and what might have been an A. Marigold, she guessed softly, or Marcus, or Marmaduke, which is a ridiculous name for a horse, and therefore an excellent one. The boy's mouth did the thing again. The small doomed movement of a mouth that has forgotten how to make sound. He shook his head. He took the horse back. He held it against his chest. "You keep his name for yourself, then?" she said. "That is quite right. Names are not for guessing." He looked at her. For the first time properly. His eyes were his father's. That same tired green, but younger and open in the way only a child's could be open. Then he turned and went out of the room without a word, and the Duke, after a moment, followed him. And Prudence sat with her cold tea and her retired veil, and the astonishing knowledge that she had, at 27, been married for 3 hours to a man she scarcely knew, in a house that did not want her, and that a small silent boy had trusted her with a horse whose name he could not say. She would remember later that she began to love her husband in that hour before he had done a single thing to earn it. Because he had stood by the fire and let her do it her way, and had not once, not with a look or a word, tried to teach her how his son was to be spoken to. He came back an hour later. She had not moved. She had, without meaning to, fallen half asleep in the chair. He did not touch her to wake her. He said her name once from across the room. And when she opened her eyes, he was standing at a careful distance and had brought a decanter and 2 glasses. "I owe you an explanation." He said several. "If you are too tired, I will bring them tomorrow." "I am too tired. Bring one tonight." He almost smiled. It did not quite reach. "Which one?" "Why, you were the one who came to the church." He poured. He handed her a glass. He sat opposite her, and for a long moment he was quiet, and she saw in the lamp's light that he was a man who had learned to weigh his words the way another man might weigh coins, because he had, at some point, spent them badly. "My brother," he said, "has been in love with a married woman for 3 years. He is 31. He is charming and weak. And I have loved him all my life, and I have never once been able to correct him. Your father's estate, forgive me, was the price he offered his creditors, when he could not pay them. Your uncle, who I understand is not a man of unusual scruple, agreed to the arrangement without informing you of its terms in full. My brother agreed because he saw no other route. He did not intend to appear this morning. I believe he intended to be in Calais by nightfall on Tuesday, and to write you a letter which would have arrived after." She held the glass. She did not drink. "Go on." "I found the letter on Wednesday. I read it. I burned it. I found him. He was in Dover, drunk, and quite prepared to sail. I asked him what he intended by you. He said, 'I will not soften it.' He said that you were a good girl and would find a kinder man. I said that in his absence a good girl would arrive at a church on Saturday and be humiliated in front of every relation she possessed, and be sent home to an uncle who would make her pay for it in every hour of the rest of her life. He said—" He stopped. He looked at the fire. "He said that he could not marry a woman he did not want, and that I, of all people, ought to understand that having married one and lost her, and never recovered. So you came instead. I came because I could not let him do it. I came because Thomas, you have seen Thomas. I came because my house is cold, and I am tired, and I was told, by an old friend of your father's, who I trust, that you are a woman of unusual quality who has been treated with unusual carelessness. I came because it was the only decent thing left to do." He looked at her at last. "I am not offering you love. I am not clever enough. And it would be an insult to offer what I do not have to give. Quote, and have to give. I am offering you a name, a house, and, I hope, my honesty. In return, I ask 2 things. Ask them. That you consider my son yours to raise, if he will let you. And that if this arrangement becomes intolerable to you, You tell me, plainly, and I will make you free of it. I will not lock you into a marriage you are not permitted to choose." She was quiet for a long time. The fire ticked. "I have conditions of my own," she said. "Name them." "You will never introduce me in this house or out of it as your brother's leavings. If anyone in this county says so within my hearing, you will correct them once and not seek my permission to do it. You will tell your son the truth of who I am and where I come from. You will not permit anyone, not Mrs. Dean, not your steward, not any of your relations, to speak of the late Duchess as though she were an obstacle to my presence. She is not. She is his mother, and she is to be honored in this house, and I will not step over her memory to occupy a chair, and you will not. This is the last. You will not thank me. Not for staying, not for the boy, not for anything I do that a wife would do. If you thank me for it, you will make it charity, and I have had a great deal of charity in my life, and I do not want any more." He looked at her. The line between his brows deepened, but the tiredness in his face had lifted, faintly, in the way weather lifts. "Agreed," he said. "All of it. Then we understand each other, we do." He rose. He did not offer his hand. He said, "The blue chamber is yours. My rooms are on the other side of the house. You are not required to receive me, and I will not require it of you. Good night, Prudence." "Good night," she said. Then, because she could not help it, "What is your name?" He paused in the doorway. "Julian," he said. "In this house, when we are alone, it is Julian." "Julian," she said, testing the word. He inclined his head and was gone. She did not sleep well, but she slept. The first weeks at Harrowmere Court were an education in silences. There was the silence of the north wing, which was closed and cold, and behind whose doors she came to understand. The late Duchess Marianne's rooms had been left untouched. Her hairbrush on the dressing-table, her books at the bedside, the counterpane turned down as though she might any evening return. There was the silence of the servants, who had loved their mistress and did not know what to make of the new one, and who watched Prudence at meals with the wary courtesy of people who had been fooled before. There was the silence of Mrs. Dean, who obeyed every instruction Prudence gave, and communicated by the exact placement of a teacup that she considered every one of them wrong. And there was the silence of the boy Thomas, who moved through the house like a small careful ghost, and who carried his wooden horse everywhere, and who watched his new stepmother with an attention so quiet it was almost tender. Safternire. Prudence did not try to be loved. She had learned at a great many other people's tables that a woman who tries to be loved is a woman who is easily refused. She simply began, on the second morning, to be useful. She had the ledgers brought to the small library. Mrs. Dean brought them, with the slow reluctance of a person handing over a weapon, and stayed to watch her open them. Prudence did not object to the watching. She had been a merchant's granddaughter before she had been a gentleman's daughter, and she read a household book the way another woman read a novel, for character and for the small betrayals of plot. "Mrs. Dean," she said after an hour without looking up, "why are we paying the Kettering butcher twice the price of the man in the village? His Grace's late father preferred the Kettering man's mutton, madam." "His Grace's late father is dead. Is his Grace of the same mind?" "His Grace has not inquired." "Has anyone inquired?" A silence. "No, madam." "Then we shall. Write to the village butcher, please, and ask for his current prices, not to give notice to Kettering, only to know." Mrs. Dean's mouth thinned in that particular way. "Yes, madam." "And Mrs. Dean?" "Madam." "The linen accounts. There is a page missing between January and February. I do not accuse anyone. I only wish to see it." The page arrived the following day. Without comment. Prudence did not remark on it. She only made a small mark in the margin of the ledger, and turned to the next matter, which was the matter of the north wing, and whether it might not be sensible, before the winter came again, to at least air the rooms and mend the roof, since the roof was leaking and would ruin what was in them if it were not attended to. "Those rooms are not to be entered, madam. His Grace's instruction. I do not propose to enter them. I propose to mend the roof above them. His Grace's late wife will not object to a dry ceiling." Mrs. Dean looked at her for a long moment. Then, very slightly, she inclined her head. It was not warmth. It was not welcome. But it was, for the first time, a gesture made to an equal. "I will speak to the steward, madam." "Thank you, Mrs. Dean." Julian was, in these first weeks, both present and absent. He appeared at breakfast. He appeared at dinner. Between the two, he was at the estate office, or writing, or in his study, behind a closed door. He did not inquire what she did with her days. He did not thank her. She had forbidden it. And to her surprise, he had honored the forbidding exactly. But she noticed, because she was learning to notice him the way he noticed everyone else, that a fire had been lit in the small library each morning without her asking. That her preferred tea had appeared on the sideboard by the third day. That when she remarked once, in passing, that the light in the small library was poor for reading. In the evening a second lamp had appeared the following evening, and neither he nor Mrs. Dean had mentioned it. He noticed. That was his way. He did not speak of what he noticed. He simply arranged quietly for the thing to be remedied. It took her some while to understand that this was how he loved. Not by declaration, not by gift, but by the removal of small daily discomforts from the paths of the people he cared for. And she had not been cared for like that in a very long time. She had in truth never been cared for like that at all. And then there was Thomas. She did not press him. She sat most afternoons at the small library's table, with the ledgers, or a book, or her mending, and she left the door open. On the fourth day, he came and stood in the doorway. On the fifth, he came in and sat on the rug near the fire, and turned the pages of a book she had left there on purpose. On the sixth, he brought his horse, and set it on the arm of her chair, quite deliberately, as if introducing it to her more formally than before. "Good afternoon," she said to the horse gravely. "I hope you slept well." Thomas's mouth moved. No sound. But he watched her face when she spoke to the horse, as though she were performing some rare and difficult trick, and he did not go away. On the eighth day she began, aloud, without addressing him, to read. She read from a book about a boy who lived on a farm, and had a pony called Trumpet, and she read badly on purpose, mispronouncing the pony's name so as to invite correction. And Thomas, she could feel him listening, did not correct her, but he did not leave. On the ninth day she noticed, half through the reading, that his lips were moving with the words. On the 10th she said, at the end of a chapter, "I think I shall stop there. My throat is tired," and set the book down and left it open at the beginning of the next chapter and went to see about the linens. When she returned an hour later, Thomas was gone, and the book was closed, and a wooden horse sat on top of it. She stood in the doorway of the library and cried quietly for perhaps a minute. And then she wiped her face on her sleeve and rang for tea. She did not tell Julian. She did not need to. He came into the small library that evening and saw the horse on the book and stopped, quite still, for the smallest moment. Then he crossed the room and picked up the horse and set it on the mantel, carefully, as though putting a candle in a place where it would not be knocked over. And he said, without turning, "His mother read to him every afternoon. He has not sat with a book since she died. He sat with one today." "I know." His voice was low. "Thank you." She looked at his back. "I forbade you." He turned, his eyes were bright, which she had not seen before. "I know," he said. I withdrew the forbidding for one sentence. I will not do it again. See that you don't, he almost laughed. The line between his brows lifted a little. You must understand, child, for this is the thing that matters, that a woman who has been treated as furniture does not lose the habit of feeling like furniture merely because someone has begun to sit in a different chair. Prudence knew, in her mind, that Julian noticed her. She knew that Thomas had left her a horse. She knew that Mrs. Dean, in the past week, had begun to say her grace without the small pause that had preceded it before. And still, in the mirror at night, before she extinguished the candle, she saw the woman she had always seen and heard, in that small, quiet voice which had been trained into her by 20 years of dinners and drawing-rooms. The girl of her size is not a girl one looks at twice. She did not believe, yet, in what was happening. She feared it more, perhaps, than she had feared the church. Cassius came in the 6th week. He came without warning, and on a morning when Julian had ridden out to the tenant farms and would not be back till dark, Mrs. Dean brought his card to Prudence in the small library with a face like a shut door. Lord Cassius Harrowmere, madam. Shall I say you are not receiving? Prudence looked at the card. Her hand was steady, which surprised her. Her heart was doing something else which did not. No, Mrs. Dean. Show him into the drawing-room. And Mrs. Dean. Madam, please have the tea brought there, and please remain within call. Yes, madam. He rose as she came in. He was handsomer than she had remembered, and softer around the mouth, and a little thinner. And he wore traveling clothes as though he had come off a boat that morning, which perhaps he had. He crossed the room with the same easy, long stride that had once, in her father's dining room, made her lose the thread of a conversation. He took her hand. He did not attempt to kiss it. Prudence, he said, I have come to apologize. Properly, I would not have my brother do it for me any longer. Sit down, Cassius. He sat. She sat. She did not offer him tea. Mrs. Dean brought it and set it down, and did not withdraw further than the corner of the room, where she busied herself, transparently, with a shelf. I have been a coward, Cassius said. His face was arranged in the correct proportions of remorse. I did not know how to face you. I did not know how to face myself. I ran. I have been in France. I have come to tell you that I have written to your uncle to accept full responsibility, and that I, Cassius, that I was mistaken, and that if there is any means by which, Cassius, stop. He stopped. His mouth, which had been forming the beautiful shape of a sentence about how he wished he could undo the harm, closed. I do not require your apology, Prudence said quietly. I require you not to speak in this house of your feelings, until you have understood mine, which you have not even attempted. You have come here to relieve yourself of a guilt, and you have chosen a morning when your brother is away, which is neither honest nor kind, neither to me nor to him. Cassius flushed. It was the first time she had seen him look, in any small way, like a boy. I did not. Prudence, I did not think. No, you did not. She set her cup down. I will tell you what you may do. You may go to the estate office and wait for your brother. You will apologize to him first, because it is he who stood in front of a church and took the disgrace you refused. You will apologize to your nephew second, because that child is 6 years old, and has spent 3 years listening to the servants whisper that his uncle is not coming, and that his father is going gray with the shame of it. You will apologize to me last, if at all, and only if you have understood by then that an apology is not a thing one does to feel better. It is a thing one offers, with the full expectation that it may not be accepted. Have I made myself clear? He was staring at her. There was briefly an expression on his face that she could not name, and then she could. It was astonishment. It was the astonishment of a man who has come to see a certain kind of woman, and has been met by another. "You have changed," he said slowly. "I have not. You never looked." He was silent. "I wish that were true," she said deliberately, and watched his eyes. For a moment he did not understand. Then, quite visibly, he did. The color left his face. "Prudence. You said it once, at my father's table. Do you remember? Someone said your brother was the best of you, and you laughed, and said I wish that were true. I carried it for 3 years. I thought you meant something you did not mean. It is a small thing, Cassius. It is only that when you speak, lightly, some of us hear you." She stood. "Go and wait for your brother. I do not want to speak of this again." He rose. He tried once to catch her hand. She did not give it. He went out into the hall, and Mrs. Dean, who had listened to every word with the intensity of a woman witnessing a small revolution, opened the door for him with a curtsy of such deep and unironic formality that Prudence, when the door closed, had to press her fingers to her mouth to keep from laughing or weeping. She could not, in the moment, tell which. Julian returned at dusk. Prudence heard the horses. She heard voices in the hall. Cassius's raised, Julian's low, a door shutting. She stayed in the small library with Thomas, who had come to sit on the rug in his usual place, and she read to him about the boy and the pony called Trumpet, and she did not raise her voice at any point, though she was listening. At length the study door across the hall opened. Steps in the passage. Cassius appeared briefly in the doorway of the small library. She did not look up and said, formally, "Prudence, I take my leave. I am sorry." He waited a moment. She did not answer. He went. Julian came in a quarter-hour later. He stood in the doorway. He looked tired. He looked, she thought, as though a stone had been taken off his chest. Thomas got up from the rug. He crossed the room. He took his father's hand. He held it, and then, and this was the thing that stopped Julian in the doorway, he tugged, gently, until his father came into the room and sat down in the chair opposite hers. Thomas returned to the rug. He picked up the book, he held it out to Prudence, and looked at her, and then at his father and back at her. "He is telling me to keep reading," she said, "and telling you to listen." "Then keep reading," Julian said, quietly. "I will listen," she read. She read 3 chapters. Thomas fell asleep on the rug, halfway through the second, his cheek pressed to the wooden horse. Julian did not move. He watched his son. Once, near the end of the 3rd chapter, she looked up and found that he was watching her. "You defended me today," he said when she closed the book. "I defended myself. You defended me first. Mrs. Dean came to me in the yard." She used the word grace without any of her usual caveats. "I have been trying to earn that word from her for 11 years. She is loyal to your late wife. That is not a fault. I know it is not." He was quiet a long time. "Prudence, may I say something, and will you not misunderstand it as thanks? Try. I did not expect to be able to breathe again in this house." She did not answer. She could not. She looked at the fire, and then at the boy asleep on the rug, and then, at last, at him. She saw a man past 40, whose hair had begun to gray at the temples, and whose eyes were the tired green of moss on the north face of a wall. And she saw that in 6 weeks something in his face had changed, a stillness had eased, and a small warmth had entered, and she understood, with the plainness of a fact one can no longer argue with, that she loved him, not the boy she had wanted to be loved by at 19. This man, the one who had stood at the altar in his brother's place because it was the only decent thing left to do, and who had not, in 6 weeks, made her feel that decency was all he had for her. She did not tell him. Juan. It was too soon, and he had told her he could not offer love. And she did not want to be the woman who forced him to say what he was not ready to say. Instead, she said, "I read to him every afternoon. You may come in whenever you please. I will not treat you as an interruption. Thank you," he said, and then caught himself, and looked at her and almost smiled. "Forgive me. I withdrew the forbidding for one sentence again. I noticed. The letter from her uncle came in the 8th week. It was long, and full of a great many words about family duty. And at its heart it said one plain thing. Her father's estate had been made over in the marriage settlement to Cassius Harrowmere personally, and not to the Harrowmere family in general. Cassius had been the named beneficiary. Cassius having failed to appear at the altar was, by the terms drawn up in her uncle's own precise handwriting, still the named beneficiary. The estate was already in effect his. Her marriage to Julian did not touch it. Her uncle enclosed his condolences on this small irregularity, and hoped very sincerely that her Grace would understand that these matters were beyond his control. She read it a 3rd time. Then she put it in her lap, and she looked at the fire for a while. She had brought nothing to this marriage. She had known, in a general sense, that she had brought nothing. She had not known that the nothing had been arranged, deliberately, in writing. By a man who had held her hand at her father's grave. She did not go to Julian at once. She went first to the small strong-box in her father's old writing desk, which had been sent up with her belongings, and which she had not opened since her father's death. She took out a bundle of papers tied with black tape. She read them. She sat for another hour. Then she sent for the steward, and she said quietly, "Please send to the village for Mr. Larkin, the solicitor. Ask him to come tomorrow at 10, and please do not mention it to his Grace." "Yes, madam." Mr. Larkin came. He was a small round man with sharp eyes who had known her father. She showed him the papers. She showed him the letter. He read both. He said at length, "Madam, your uncle has been either careless or clever, and I do not think he is careless." "No, nor do I. The estate transfer to Lord Cassius Harrowmere is valid. But there is a codicil to your father's will. This document here, which your uncle appears to have overlooked or hoped had been forgotten. Your father, madam, retained the mineral rights on the western tenancies. Those rights were not conveyed, they passed to you directly. They are, forgive my crudeness, madam, considerably more valuable than the land itself. Your uncle would have known this. He appears to have gambled that you would not." She was quiet. "How much more valuable, Mr. Larkin?" He named a figure. She sat very still. "Then," she said, "we shall not disturb my cousin Cassius in the possession of the land. He is welcome to it. But the mineral rights are mine, and I should like them registered in my name in this county before Sunday, if that is possible." "It is possible, madam. Register them not to my Grace. Register them to Prudence Ashford, my maiden name." In full. Mr. Larkin looked at her over his spectacles. Then he inclined his head. "Yes, madam. I understand." He did understand. She saw that he did. She was grateful. She told Julian that evening in the small library, after Thomas had gone to bed. She told him the whole of it, her uncle's letter, the papers from her father's box, Mr. Larkin's visit, the mineral rights registered in her own name. She did not soften it. She watched his face while she spoke. He listened without interrupting. When she had done, he was quiet a while. Then he said, "Why in your own name?" "Because I have been given in my life to a great many people who did not want me, and thought they were doing me a favor. I do not intend to give myself or anything of mine to another one. Even you, Julian. If tomorrow you were to decide that this marriage was intolerable, and set me free of it, as you promised, I should walk out of this house with what was mine. I will not walk into another life with nothing in my hands." He looked at her for a long time. "You are the most sensible woman I have ever met," he said at last. "And I do not know why I said sensible. I meant something else." "What did you mean?" He opened his mouth. He closed it. He shook his head once, slowly. "Not yet," he said. "Forgive me. Not yet." She did not press him. She had in her life learned the shape of a man who was working towards something and could not be hurried. She said only, "Very well," and reached for the fire irons, and mended the fire. Winter closed in early that year. By the middle of November the drive to Harrowmere Court was walled with snow, and the north wing roof, mended at last on Prudence's insistence, held against the storms that others did not. The village priest came up to say that the church roof had gone in the great gale, and Prudence, without asking permission, because she had stopped asking permission for anything she believed to be right, sent the mason and paid him out of the mineral money, and would not accept the priest's thanks. To thank her father, who had left her the means, Mrs. Dean, by December, called her her Grace, without any hesitation, and once, in the housekeeper's own small parlor, wept a little and said, "Madam, I did not think I should ever be sorry to have been wrong about a person, and I have never been so glad of a sorriness in my life." And Prudence, who did not weep easily, and they drank the housekeeper's private sherry together in a silence that was, for the first time, warm. Thomas began to speak on the second Sunday of Advent. It happened in the small library. Prudence was reading. Thomas was on the rug with his horse. She had come to a passage in the book where the pony called Trumpet went missing in a snowstorm, and the boy in the story sat up all night calling his name, and she was reading it slowly because her voice had begun to shake, and she did not know why, when Thomas said quite clearly, "Merrylegs." She stopped reading. She did not look at him. She kept her eyes on the book. She said very softly, "Is that his name?" "Merrylegs," said Thomas again. His voice was small and rusted. "Mamma named him before." She did not ask, "Before what?" She did not turn her head. She only said, "It is a very fine name." "I think it suits him," Thomas said, in the same small voice. She said, "If I sang to him, he would run faster." I sang to him. Then she got sick. Mrs. Barlow said he stopped. She waited. Mrs. Barlow said the singing was too loud. She said Mama was tired. She said I made Mama tired. And Mama died. The book had gone. Still in her hands, she set it, carefully, on the arm of the chair. She got down onto the rug. She sat beside him, not too close, and she said quietly, "Thomas, listen to me. Your mother did not die because you sang." Mrs. Barlow was tired, and grown people say things when they are tired that are not true. Your mother loved your voice. She would have wanted you to sing to Merrylegs every day of your life. And the reason you have not spoken in 3 years is not that your voice is dangerous. It is that you were kind, and you were trying to keep her safe by being quiet. And there is nothing left now to keep quiet for. Do you understand me? He looked at her. His eyes were his father's. His mouth trembled. "I sang her to sleep," he whispered. "You did not sing her to sleep. She was ill. She was ill for a long time before you sang. And she would have died whether or not any sound had ever been made in that house. You did not do it. You could not have done it. And if anyone tells you again, ever, that you did, you come and find me, and I will tell them the truth of it, in a voice they will not forget." He was quiet. Then he said, "Will you sing to me?" She sang. She sang the only song she remembered from her mother, which was an old country hymn about a river and a stone, and she sang it badly, because her voice was not trained. And Thomas listened, and put his cheek against her arm, and after a while, in a small and rusted way, he sang with her. Julian was in the doorway. She did not know how long. When she looked up, he was crying without sound, in the particular way of a man who has forgotten how, and she said nothing, and he came into the room and sat down on the rug beside them both, and put his hand very carefully on the back of his son's head. And Thomas did not stop singing. Later, when Thomas had been put to bed, and the fire in the small library had burned down to red, Julian sat opposite her and said, "Mrs. Barlow was my mother's old nurse. She came to us when Marianne was ill. She was not a cruel woman. She was tired. She said the thing that people say. I never knew he had heard it. I never knew he was carrying it. He was carrying it for 3 years. I should have known. You could not have known if he did not speak. He did not speak, because he thought his voice was dangerous. That is nothing you could have found. It took a stranger reading a book about a pony to find it." He looked at her. "You are not a stranger," he said. "Prudence. You are not." "Not any more," she said. "No." He was silent a long while. Then he said, "I have something to tell you. I have been trying to say it for 6 weeks. I have been trying to find a way to say it that would not seem like gratitude. I told you at the altar I could not offer love. I said it because I believed it. I do not any longer. I do not know at what hour it changed. I do not know if it changed on the day you set your conditions, or on the day Thomas left his horse on the book, or on the day you defended my house against my brother, or on some hour I have not noticed. I only know that it has changed, and that I did not deserve it to, and that I am telling you now because I promised you, once, my honesty." She did not answer at once. She looked at the fire. She thought about the seams of a gown giving way in a church. She thought about a wooden horse whose name had been Merrylegs. She thought about a letter which had said once, at a table, "I wish that were true," and how it had lived in her, and how it had emptied out of her, sometime in the last weeks, without her noticing. "Julian," she said at last. "Yes. Do not say it if it is gratitude. It is not gratitude. Do not say it because you are tired, and because I mended your roof, and because your son called me nothing in particular but did not go away. It is not that either." "Then what is it?" He looked at her. His face was not composed. She had never seen his face not composed. "I love you," he said. "And, Paul, I love your steadiness, and I love the way you do not flinch, and I love the way you cried in the carriage on the 7th mile, and pretended you had not. I love that you set conditions I could not have thought of, and then held me to them, and did not let me thank you. I love that you called yourself my brother's leavings once in front of me, at dinner, and did not soften it so that I could be angry on your behalf, and know that I was angry for the right reasons. I love, Prudence, I love that you are beautiful. And I say it as a fact, not as a kindness. I do not know how the world has managed to look at you for 27 years and not seen it. I did not see it either. On the day I married you, I saw it on the day you sat down on a rug beside my son and made him a promise. And I have been able to see nothing else since." She was crying. She had not meant to. "You promised not to thank me," she said. And it was not quite steady. "I am not thanking you. I am telling you. There is a difference. I am asking. Also, may I stay? In your rooms. Tonight? And after?" She looked at him. "Yes," she said, "you may stay." He rose. He crossed to her. He knelt, awkwardly, because he was a large man and the rug was low, and he put his forehead against her knee, and she put her hand on the back of his neck, where the hair had begun to gray, and they stayed like that a long while, without speaking, because there was nothing left to say that had not, in the last hour, been said. The reckoning came in the spring. Cassius came home. He came home not in shame this time, but in a certain quiet. And he stayed a week at Harrowmere Court, at Julian's invitation, and he sat at their table and made civil conversation, and did not once meet Prudence's eyes across the roses. On the last day of his visit, he asked her privately, in the small library, whether she would ever forgive him. "For not marrying me," she said. "I forgave you for that in the 8th week. It was the best thing you ever did for me, though you did it by accident, for not seeing you." She was quiet. "That," she said, "is not mine to forgive. It is yours to remedy with the next person you meet who is worth seeing." He nodded slowly. "I have written to your uncle," he said. "The mineral rights are yours. He will not contest them. He knows he will lose." "I know he will lose. Mr. Larkin has been very clear. Prudence." "Cassius, I am not unkind. I am only finished. Go and be a better man than you were. You have the time, you have the name, you have nothing left in your way except yourself." He inclined his head. He went. He did not, so far as she knew, come to Harrowmere Court again for many years, though later, much later, he wrote her a letter from Italy, where he had settled with a woman he had at last learned to love properly, and the letter began, "Dear Prudence." She kept the letter. The public reckoning, for there was one, as there always is in a county, came at the midsummer ball at Kettering, which was the first ball the new Duchess of Harrowmere had attended. She had refused 3 before it. She attended this one because Julian had asked her, quietly, whether she would, and had said, without any pressure, that he would like the county to meet his wife, and that if she preferred not, they would not go, and that either was well. She went. She wore a new gown, which she had had cut for her body, which fit. She wore her mother's pearls. She walked in on Julian's arm, and every eye in the ballroom turned. There was a hush. There was, from the corner where the Dowager Lady Merrick and her set had gathered, a murmur which contained the word. Prudence heard it clearly, because she had trained her ear to it a long time ago. Fat, Julian heard it too. He stopped. He turned. He walked. Not quickly, to the corner where Lady Merrick sat, and he said in a voice that was not raised, and that carried nevertheless to every part of the room, "Lady Merrick, good evening. I heard you speak of my wife. I would like to be certain I understood you correctly. Would you repeat it?" Lady Merrick, who had been the terror of the county for 30 years, opened her mouth and closed it. "I thought not," Julian said mildly. "May I recommend in the future that when you speak of the Duchess of Harrowmere you use her title, or her name, or, if you are truly at a loss for a word, the observation that she is the woman who mended the church roof in the great gale, and who taught my son to speak again, and who is beloved in her household to a degree I have not seen in any house, in this county. Any of those will serve. Good evening." He turned. He offered Prudence his arm again. They walked into the center of the room. "The dance was beginning," he said quietly, so that only she heard. "Prudence, dance with me. I do not dance well." "Nor do I. We shall be badly matched together." "It is the best sort of match," she laughed. She had not expected to laugh in that room. She danced. She was not graceful. She was, in truth, a little breathless by the end of the first turn. But she danced, and Julian led her badly, exactly as he had promised, and when the music finished the room applauded. Not loudly, not warmly, but it applauded. Because the Duke of Harrowmere had chosen his wife in front of them, and they had understood that they were being in front.